Hello and welcome to the Earth Movers podcast. It's your boy, Zach Oy, back at it again with actually the first ever episode that I have ever done. So, my guest today is my good friend and often partner in mischief, Luke Staley. As Luke says, he's an avid life adventurer, he's an amateur mixed martial arts fighter, a poet, and student of English and political science at Hood College in Frederick, Maryland. It was based on the conversations that we've had over the years that as soon as I started doing these podcasts, I knew that Luke was one of the first people I wanted to get on here. In this episode, we're going to talk about intrinsic motivation and how to stay fit and ready through the obstacles that will inevitably come at you through life. All according links should be able to be found in the description of wherever you're getting this podcast. All of Luke's social media handles will also be available in the description. And without further ado, guys, I hope you enjoy the first episode of Earth Movers. What's up, guys? Welcome to the podcast. First episode of many more, hopefully. I'm here with my buddy Luke Staley. Luke, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Oh, this is your first episode.
This is my first ever episode.
That's cool. No, I'm super honored. So, my name is Luke Staley. I am a English and political science double major at Hood College, where Zach also attends, and that's how we know each other. I am, I don't know, it sounds kind of pretentious to say I consider myself a Renaissance man. Let's just say I'm someone who likes to do a lot of things.
Yeah, you do.
I'm an amateur mixed martial artist, a cage fighter. We'll definitely talk about that.
Yes, sir.
A little more later, but that's something I do for artistic purposes more than anything else. I write a lot of poetry. I guess by default it makes me a poet, but I'm not a very good one because things like that take time. You got to pay your dues.
That's right.
Write a lot of bad poems.
That's right.
Before you write any good ones. But yeah, I do a lot. Hopefully we'll get into that, but I enjoyed, hanging out with Zach because we like to talk about just a lot of different things. I think our minds work in a way that we so enthusiastically engage in the exploration of the human experience.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We come at life with a lot of energy. So, but yeah, man. So let's just open it up with tell us a little bit about your fight. First and foremost, I'm gonna put the link to the video wherever this is to be found. But they can find your fight. You won in the first round. I mean, with the guillotine, no contest. It was a good fight. I think Luke Huntsinger, who was his opponent, put up a pretty good fight. But at the end, you just came in with so much energy. I mean, that's what I would just say was that you really just. I was listening to these announcers. The first recording that I found was these announcers like talking about how Huntsinger's gonna win. He's just got so much height, but like. He clearly just didn't really take advantage of that height. Like he was very on the defense, and I guess from what I could see, and granted, I am by no means a professional when it comes to fighting or fighting technique or anything, but you just came out with a lot of energy, and you were clearly putting his prerogative of being on the defense, and you weaponized that against him.
Yeah. So real quick before we get into the details of the fight, let me just preface it I think. A lot of people nowadays are familiar with the concept of mixed martial arts with the rising popularity of the UFC,
sure,
and other big fighting organizations. But for anyone who isn't, mixed martial arts is a combat sport, like boxing, like wrestling. But your rule set is much more expansive. You can punch, you can kick. You can take the opponent to the ground. The fight has no breaks in it. So in boxing, if a fighter falls, they get a break, a separation, an 8 count. The ref counts them off if they get knocked down with a punch.
Right.
But in mixed martial arts, besides the 1 minute breaks in between the rounds, there's no stop. It's a constant flow of the fight. You can win by knockout. You can win by submission, a chokehold, an arm lock, a leg lock. So in my mind, it's the most pure form of combat. I mean, aside from being able to, eye gouge or kick a guy in the nuts, your ways to win the consensual hand-to-hand fight is
pretty open,
pretty unlimited.
Pretty infinite,
I mean, people think there's a misconception, and I think less so for people who follow the sport, but for people who don't, there's a big misconception. Oh my gosh, like fighters, they fight in a cage. They're animals. These must be angry people who had rough childhoods who need to get their anger out.
Right.
But it's really not that way at all. I mean, I find certainly there are some people who come from a rough past, and mixed martial arts is a therapeutic way to get out some of their aggression. But this is not a tough guy sport. there's a great quote by Mike Tyson, former heavyweight boxing champion, who says, "Everybody thinks fighting's a tough guy sport." He said, "A tough guy will get hurt in this sport real bad, real fast. This is a thinking man's sport."
Yeah.
And I really think that is. I mean, you hear a lot of professional mixed martial artists equate combat sports, mixed martial arts to chess. I mean, it's a very cerebral sport. And I do it because I think there's some artistic expression in it.
Right. You talk about that a lot.
Yeah. I mean, if I could be a famous singer or a famous actor or a famous painter or a better poet, man, I'd love to do that instead. But I can't sing or dance or anything like that, but I can express myself really well through mixed martial arts, through combat sports, through consensual violence, which in a weird primal way is really beautiful to see two guys, or even two girls, like female mixed martial arts is rising at a rapid pace, but to see two individuals just put everything on the line and compete in such a visceral atmosphere, I think is kind of beautiful. Like, they're trying to hurt each other, but at the same time, they're both putting so much on the line, their physical health, but also like their status, like their friends and family, their people are there, and they're risking getting like hurt badly in front of them. Man. But anyways, this most recent fight, quick synopsis of it, I fought on Cowboy Fight Series. If any of you guys know who Donald Cowboy Cerrone is, he's a legend in combat sports. He has the most wins, most fights, and most finishes in UFC history. His next fight's against Conor McGregor, which even if you're not a UFC fan, you've probably heard that name. So it'd be the equivalent of if you played basketball, getting to play a basketball game in front of Michael Jordan. If you played soccer, getting to play a soccer game in front of Cristiano Ronaldo or Lionel Messi.
And for context, this is what you did. This is what you got.
Cowboy Cerrone owns his own amateur fight promotion where he takes some of the top amateur talent in the region and has them invites them onto his show to fight in front of him to showcase their skills. And I got a call up to fight on Cowboy Fight Series. A huge opportunity. Went out. I got to open up the main card, which was really cool, and I won that fight via first round submission. And that was honestly such a cool experience. So short into my career. Hopefully I'll have a lot more highlights to come, but that's what I'm coming off of. I just fought on December 21st, and awesome. Still riding high for that. But they say you're never as bad as they say you are after you lose, and you're never as good as they say you are after the win. Right. So not gonna let it get to my head and just on to the next one.
Yeah, man. So talk a little bit more about the concept of like artistry in fighting. I mean, how do you personally bring your own unique spin to your style? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So because mixed martial arts is so almost infinite in the amount of ways you can express yourself through combat. You can be an aggressive fighter, a patient fighter. You can be a fighter that really sets the pace with your cardio and your power punches, or you can be a fighter who, maybe tries to take your opponent down and wear him out on the ground. It's literally infinite the amount of ways almost that you can win.
Right.
So a lot of times what you see is fighters' personalities express themselves in the cage. You'll see people quit mentally. You'll see resilient people fight through adversity. And as far as styles go, like Zach was mentioning, I'm super energetic. I love to bring a high, entertaining pace to the fight. And so my expression of combat sports is one where I want to give the fans something that they'll remember, whether they're there to see me or someone else. At the end of the night, I want them to be like, man, that Luke Staley kid, that's someone I want to see fight again in the future. Maybe to my detriment, I've had a decision or two fight. Maybe I thought of one that didn't go my way because I tried to be too flashy. But, you kind of live by the sword, die by the sword. I know that fighting exciting fights has gotten me a lot of opportunities as well and wins. Yeah. But, I see mixed martial arts as an expression of artistry, like you said, where I get to go out and create something, a moment in time that people will remember. I mean, I know definitely for me, there's been fighters that I've watched them fight, and it's really inspired me to be like, I want to do that. And at the same time, what I just saw, like, I'll never forget that. I saw a man or a woman go out there and put their heart and soul. They just left it in the cage. Yeah. And it inspires me to do things outside of fighting in my life when I see a person who dedicates so much time and discipline, blood, sweat, and tears, and accomplishes a goal. It's like, yeah, not everyone has to be a fighter, but can't everyone take that mentality of someone chasing their dream, going out and accomplishing something that took a lot of hard work to get? And so that's what I want to do as a fighter. I want to use, this platform as a combat sports athlete, not to beat up another guy in the cage. Honestly, I hate fighting people, but I love the art of mixed martial arts.
Yeah.
The puzzle of taking a combatant and essentially incapacitating them as effectively as possible.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah. No, from my understanding, I'm not like a historian on this, but some of the original martial arts like judo and Japanese jiu-jitsu were created by samurai.
Yeah.
And the goal of these martial arts was if you somehow lost your weapon, your sword in combat, they developed a system of martial arts to make it so a samurai could win a fight without a sword in as few moves as possible. So if you know anything about judo, it's very throw heavy.
Yeah, right.
You grab someone, you throw them through the air.
Sure.
And if you've ever been thrown on a mat before, like that hurts. If you take someone and throw them and hit them on the ground, like
that hurts really bad.
Yeah, that can incapacitate an opponent. And I feel like that same spirit of martial arts is carried through into what I think is the highest form of expression right now, which is mixed martial arts, something like the UFC or Bellator, where the goal is still the same. Obviously, it's at a much higher level than it was when it was first invented, but the spirit of how can I use these techniques to win a fight as quickly and effectively as possible while receiving as little damage as possible.
Yeah.
Like, that was the spirit of martial arts when it was first invented. That's what we tune in to watch it for today. Which fighter is going to win as effectively as possible?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about what's your thoughts on bare knuckle boxing? So I actually very recently saw a Vice doc about how this guy's trying to revive bare knuckle boxing and make it a pro sport and kind of make it something that's competitive with professional boxing or the UFC. But I've heard Joe Rogan kind of give his little, opinion on what he thinks about bare knuckle boxing, how he thinks the gloves are actually one of the more dangerous pieces of equipment that actually, cause people to throw punches that are, a little bit more damaging than they would otherwise do if they didn't have that padding. And he's basically talking about how the padding is really only to defend the knuckle of the man throwing it rather than the face of the person
Absolutely,
catching it.
Yeah. If you've, for people who have thrown a punch without gloves before and hit something hard, like, it hurts.
It does.
There's a lot of small bones in your hand. I can't watch movies anymore sometimes without being taken out of it, because I'll see, like, the hero punch a guy in the face with his hand, and even if it knocks the guy out, I'd be like, yeah, if you hit a guy that hard without gloves, you'd break your hand.
Yeah.
And so what Rogan thinks, Joe Rogan, a UFC commentator, runs a huge podcast. What Zach is talking about, bare knuckle boxing, is exactly what it sounds like. It's boxing without the big gloves. He thinks it's a more pure expression of combat because you'd fight like you actually would fight in a street fight.
Sure.
And I will never criticize a fighter for going out and experimenting with new forms of combat, but I personally don't like bare knuckle boxing as much as modern day boxing or mixed martial arts. Yes, it's more, I guess, realistic of what it would be like in a street fight, but I feel like it's, man, I feel like sometimes it's a detriment to the fighter's longevity because they're getting cut. Obviously, the surface area of your knuckles is really small. It's like hitting someone with a bunch of quarters, like, on your hand. Like, people's faces get cut up and your hands get broken. And, obviously I want martial arts to be a pure form of combat. But the slightly modified sporting version of combat sports, which is combat sports with gloves, like boxing and mixed martial arts, is just so much safer for the fighters.
Right.
And it allows them to really, throw punches without worrying about breaking their hands, which I think is, like, a lot more entertaining.
Right.
And I almost think it allows them to express their combat more openly because they're not afraid to experiment with more, crazy techniques or, throw punches like they're trying to knock a guy's head into the back row of a stadium.
It's a little more approachable.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So tell us a little bit about, like, what's the future for you? What you were telling me earlier about how you are trying to do something like 4 more fights this year or 3 more fights this year? Yeah,
so right now I'm an amateur mixed martial artist. There's no setting for how many amateur fights you need before you go pro. Unlike sports that are have been around longer, more established, like football, baseball, basketball, where you play your club, you play in high school. If you're good, you'll get a chance to play in college, and then if you do good in college, you might get drafted into a professional organization. For fighting, You fight as many times as you want on the amateur circuit. You can have a winning record or a losing record, and when you think it's time to go pro, you can start reaching out to professional organizations and find a fight, and they'll probably book you. I mean, there's a lot of organizations out there looking for fighters, and really all they care about is making money. So if they can get a guy who sells a lot of tickets, they don't really care about you. Basically what I'm saying, I don't want to ramble on too long in the semantics of it, but you can kind of go pro whenever you want.
Right.
So it's up to you and making sure you have a good team around you who make sure that you go pro at the right time.
Yeah.
So I have 5 amateur fights right now, and I'd like at least 5 more. I'd like 10.
Okay.
The only difference, honestly, between amateur and pro is you need a lot more medicals for pro, a lot more paperwork, and you get paid.
Yeah.
But essentially, I'm doing the same thing as an amateur. Like, people buy tickets to come watch me fight in a cage, and the only difference is I don't really get paid.
Right. So the way like the pros profit essentially is by ticket sales, by sponsorships, and then by winnings. So are those like the 3 kind of main?
Those are the 3 main things, and the big one, your first couple of fights is going to be ticket sales and sponsorships.
Yeah.
But you get like 10-20% of your ticket sales. But if you keep winning your fights, build up a good record, 10-0, 10-1, whatever, something around that mark, then you'll get a call up from a bigger organization like the UFC or Bellator. They'll be like, hey, we've seen, you're 10-1 as a professional on this regional circuit. Why don't you get a chance? We're going to give you a chance to fight in the UFC. And that's where you can actually start making real money.
Yeah.
Just by showing up and fighting and being a professional athlete. Yeah. Wow. So right now, like I said, I'm still grinding in the amateur circuit. I'm still a full-time college student.
That's right.
Once I finish college and my coaches and team think I'm ready, I'll make my pro debut. Nothing really matters in your amateur career other than you want experience and you don't want to go pro too early or even too late.
Right.
Your record resets to 0-0. So
as soon as you
go pro, So if you're 10-0 as an amateur and then lose your first professional fight, you're now
0-1.
Yeah, you're 0-1 now.
Yeah.
And I mean that's that way for any professional sport. No one has a MVP season in the NFL and then someone goes, "Oh, but he had a bad game in college or a bad game in high school." It's like, no one really cares what you do until you go pro. So it's on you to make sure you get to the level you need to be as an amateur before you make that leap into the professional circuit. But yeah, my full intention is to fight professionally as a mixed martial artist for a year or 2 just to check it off the bucket list. But after that, I only have one life to live. I kind of want to explore some different elements of that too. I want to maybe try to join the special forces.
Yeah, like you said, you're a Renaissance man. There's going to be a lot in store for you, so that's really exciting. Let's transition a little bit. I've gotten a lot of questions so far asking you about how do you prepare? How do you train? And being someone that's been close to you, I've seen, when you're in the crunch time and when you're fasting and, and you're trying to cut weight. But talk about from the jump. I mean, when you first find out you have a fight, what does the preparation process look like from point A all the way to point, B, C, D when it's like, a day before the fight? Yeah,
so this is a great question, preparation of how to get ready for a fight. Now, fighters tend to do this thing called camps, where you get a fight booked. Typically it's about 8 weeks out. Your manager, your coach will come to you. We've got an opponent and we've got a date, January, whatever, at this show. So you'll know when you're fighting and who you're fighting. And you'll have 8 weeks to put in a training camp. More and more with the evolution of mixed martial arts, you'll see guys just train really hard all year round. And really the only thing you're changing is maybe a little bit more intense sparring or diet when you have a fight booked. But when you get that fight booked, a huge part of mixed martial arts is making weight. So you have to get your diet down so you can make your weight class. But for me, I kind of train hard all year round. It'll look something like, I go to college in the day, and Monday through Thursday, Monday through Friday, I'm training 8:30 to 10 at night, mixed martial arts. And then I'll train miscellaneous stuff on the weekend. But essentially, I'm training 6 to 7 days a week. I always get in a Friday session too. And then I'm doing stuff in the mornings like jogging, sprints, lifting weights, stuff like that. I'll try to do 2 sessions a day. maybe Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'll do something in the morning. So 3 days of the week I'm doing 2 days, and then pretty much every day of the week I'm training at night with my team.
Right.
What actually we're doing, you have to separate your training into, I'd say, the three main areas of mixed martial arts, which is stand-up, striking, groundwork, your wrestling and your jiu-jitsu, and your work off the fence, cage work. Obviously, you're in a cage, so you have to learn how to defend takedowns in the cage, defend strikes on the cage, stuff like that. And we find a coach that we really like. Fighters, you should do find a coach that you trust, and then let them put your program together. So I'll do, depending on who I'm fighting, depending on what strategy I want to implement, different things almost every night. Some days we'll go really heavy on wrestling. Some days we'll really go heavily on jiu-jitsu. Other days we'll go really heavy on kickboxing or boxing. But really the secret to being a successful fighter is just finding a coach you like, that works for you, that you know is smart, and then showing up to practice every day. One of the things that surprised me a lot about becoming an amateur mixed martial artist is fight teams are not usually separated into amateur and pro teams. A lot of gyms, I'd say the majority, they have an MMA fight team, but the pros and the amateurs, train together. So you get an opportunity to see how professionals work. I trained with one of the best professional fighters on the East Coast. He might be the best professional fighter on the East Coast outside the UFC, undefeated. His name's Terry Bartholomew. Shout out to Terry. Undefeated as an amateur, Terry was. He's 7-2 as a pro.
Wow.
I think he's finished 4 or 5 of those 7 wins. He's never been finished himself. And he's submitted and beaten fighters from big organizations like Bellator and One Championship, which is a huge professional organization over in Asia. And he's got some big fights in the works again soon. He's probably, I'd imagine 2 or 3 wins away from the UFC. Wow. He probably could be there now if he wanted to. But anyways, I get to train with him on a daily basis, and he's just a normal guy. There's nothing special about him in the sense that he's not, some, freak nature, godlike, world-class athlete. I mean, obviously he's a professional athlete. That's how he makes his living, is fighting in a cage. But what he does, the hardest thing that he does, which is the hardest thing for every fighter to do, is he's consistent. He shows up to practice when he's tired. He wakes up and trains, when he's sore. He shows up every day, and even on the days where he has bad days, he's still there. I mean, that's the thing that I can't emphasize enough is fighters are not just special people, or they're not special people. And honestly, no one that you meet in any field is anything other than human. They've just done their craft and showed up every day and gotten better. And so that's really the secret to being successful at anything you do, is just showing up every day and working hard at what you do.
No, that's a really good point. I talk to a lot of people about this point of discipline versus motivation, and how a lot of people are like, man, I really want to find the motivation to go do this thing. And it's like, well, how do you expect that you're always going to wake up in the morning and feel like Bruce Lee, or feel like somebody that's like screaming in your mind, like, hey, go do this, you got to do this. It's not really about that. It's just about the concept of, I have this scheduled because I know long term I have this goal, and the only way to get there is to show up every single day. And so I really like that you brought that up.
Yeah, and no, it's tough, man. I had 3 part-time jobs. I had 18 credits this semester in college. And 18 credits the previous semester and this semester, rather. So full course load, lots of part-time work to get myself through school and pay for training. And I train minimum 15 to 16 hours a week for mixed martial arts. So that's another part-time job in and of itself. So it is a lot of organization. It is a decent amount of discipline, but man, I love this sport so much. It's not for everybody. I think everyone should train martial arts, but I understand that everyone might not want to compete in MMA. But if it's the sport for you, man, no other sport will do it for you.
Right, go for it. Talk to me a little bit about your self-talk. Like, how do you, well, let's go beyond self-talk even. How do you kind of maintain like a mental homeostasis that you can, be tranquil, that you can be, focused and, do all these things, but without burning out?
So I guess there's almost two parts to that question. How do you not burn out? How do you get the mindset?
Sure.
Mindset comes through preparation. Whether you're about to fight another train killer in a cage or take an exam that you've been worrying about, your confidence will come through preparation. Mm-hmm. So if you're eating the wrong foods, not training every day, you're going to be walking out to that cage, watching that other guy staring you down as you're about to, fight him. And you're going to be like, oh my gosh, like, this is, what did I get myself into? Whereas if you, did everything that you were supposed to do leading up to the competition, you step into the cage knowing, if I give it my 100%, this is going to go well. Maybe I will, win. Maybe I will lose. It's an unforgiving sport with a really small margin for error.
Right.
But I know that I've done everything to give a good performance, which is going to set me up really well for winning. And I know that win, lose, or draw, when I leave it all in the cage, I'll be satisfied with what I did. That's confidence.
Yeah.
And like I said, that goes into any area of life. If you've prepped really hard for a job interview, and even going beyond that, years before this job interview, you studied hard in college. You got the right internships, and then, in the days leading up to it, you mentally prepped yourself and visualized. You're going to go into that job interview feeling like you belong there, feeling like you deserve this job, and you're going to have the confidence to kill that interview. How do I keep myself from burning out? I love the sport, man.
Right.
Certainly there's days where it sucks, but at the end of the day, I wouldn't trade it for absolutely anything. Yeah. I love this lifestyle. The diet's hard, the discipline's hard, your body hurts. You are a little bit mentally drained, but oh my gosh, man, the rush of, stepping into a cage and fighting in front of, hundreds of people. There have been shows, even as an amateur, where there are 1,000 or more people there live, getting the fight in front of them and hearing that roar of the crowd. Dude, nothing else is like it. But more than that, much more than that, is what I proved to myself. Like, I doubt myself constantly. I think of myself as lazy. I think of myself as weak. I think of myself as a coward. This is not unique to me. These are self-doubts that we all have.
Sure.
Every single one of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you can, sort of quell those doubts with hard work in any area. It doesn't have to be a sport. It could be, an art. It could be writing, journaling, ceramics.
Whatever.
Going off the rails. But but for me, it is fighting. And so when I get to step into that cage, and when the fight is over, get your hand raised, or maybe it doesn't go your way. But at the end of the day, man, I spent 8 weeks, giving my heart and soul to this. And I went out and did something that was really scary, something that I never believed I could do. And I just did it, I know that at least that night, I wasn't a weak person. I wasn't a coward. At least for those 8 weeks, I wasn't, unambitious or lazy. And getting to prove that to myself is worth every bit of sacrifice. And keeping that in mind when things get tough, that's how I kind of keep from burning out. I found something that I love to do. And I've dedicated myself fully to it.
Right. And you've gone after it with 100% energy.
Yeah, it's the only way you can do something. In any area of life, there's no sense in going into something if you're only going to give it half your effort.
Right.
You're wasting your time. You might as well find something else you like and put 100% effort into that.
Yeah.
People talk about this thing where they're like afraid to take risks, and there's this great quote I love by Jim Carrey where he said, Jim Carrey, the actor, comedian.
Sure, yeah.
Obviously, if you make it, acting's a lucrative business, but for every successful actor, there's 100 wannabes, and he was just talking about chasing your dream and everything, and he said, you can fail at playing it safe, so why not risk failing at something you love to do? So if you have something that you're passionate about, and you have voices in your head or people around you who, hell, maybe they have good intentions, but are telling you to take the safe path, whatever that may be, just understand that you can fail miserably at taking that quote unquote safe path. Or maybe succeed and be miserable.
Exactly.
Which might even be worse.
Frankly, I think
so.
It is.
Why not risk it and go for the thing that you enjoy? Explore life. You only get one. As generic as it sounds, like
Yeah, why survive when you can thrive?
Yeah, dude, that's been so trippy, dude. I've been thinking about this so recently. Oh my gosh, like all of a sudden I'll just be aware of my own consciousness. Like, how crazy is it that like I have consciousness, that I'm sentient, that I'm aware of my surroundings.
Right.
And all of a sudden I get overwhelmed with this great gratitude for being alive. Like, what is this thing that I'm experiencing? Like, I'm experiencing consciousness in a finite set of time. I get an opportunity to explore this floating rock in the middle of space.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and everyone's got problems. There's always going to be stresses. But when you think about how crazy it is that we get a chance to just be. To exist.
I was just going to say that. Just be.
Yeah. Every trivial stress that you're, worried about seems so much smaller, and you have a little bit more freedom, I think, to
it's funny. I think that's part of where we are in this epidemic now of depression and anxiety, and maybe not as much anxiety, but like this feeling of existential dread. Like what are we doing? That causes, I'd say, the majority of people to become ridden to their beds, to their computers, to their whatever it is, that it's easy to just kind of like exist in a period of like stasis, not actually doing anything, not actually going for anything. And so I think that's such a good concept of, you can fail doing literally anything. You can fail just having a minimum wage job and just getting by and just paying the bills and not actually going out and doing anything.
Yeah, getting that degree in accounting rather than going out and trying to be a singer or something.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so it is that realization of whatever comes next, and nobody has the answer to this. Whoever tells you they do, okay, take it with a grain of salt, because nobody has the exact answer. But whatever comes next is secondary to what is now. And I believe what is now and where you put yourself in that vibration that you kind of exist in right here and now, you're going to carry that. If you die and wherever you go off to, you most likely will carry that with you. And so it's all about like, why right now am I allowing myself to exist in this place of fear and exist in this place of, doing nothingness because I'm, crippled by fear? Why would I not harness that fear and, go take a massive risk? Because at the end of the day, all things are temporal. All things are temporary.
That's a rhetorical question. Why not risk it? But I think I have an answer for it, which is people are really afraid to get outside their comfort zone.
Yeah.
And gosh, like a blessing and a curse of Western society, Western civilization, is that we have a really big comfort zone. Like, you can live a life of leisure and comfort. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't want to get like too political, but like relatively easy. I mean, I know it's definitely harder for some people than not. I don't want to sound ignorant and say that there aren't many people in America alone that live in poverty and will struggle to reach that middle class homeostasis. But I mean, a lot of people, gosh, even our lower middle class, even our poor in America live better than some of the middle class in other countries. Right. But for a lot of people, I'll just say a lot of people in America, and again, I don't want to sound condescending or naive. I know this is not the reality for everyone, but for many, there is the danger of, you can live a life, go to college, or find a job you like, and live a middle class life, middle class job, wife, 2 kids, dog, vacation once a year, pay off your college debt till you're 40, pay off your mortgage till you're 60, pay off your kids' college debt till you're 80, and live a really comfortable life, really not doing anything your whole life.
Right.
You can just, you got 3 meals a day, a warm place to sleep, and you can go your entire life without really ever getting outside your comfort zone.
Sure.
You watch your TV shows, you do your, once a year fishing trip, like. You can, it's so easy to just waste your life away in the society. And gosh, that is like almost a beautiful thing, that poverty in the world and starvation and disease is at the lowest it's ever been in the history of human civilization. Sure. Like, that is cool, but a side effect of that is we're so comfortable now. Yeah. It is possible to be born into a nice, comfy middle class family and live your entire life without ever having to face discomfort.
For sure. Yeah. And I'd say that fear of facing discomfort, well, maybe not even the fear, but the just you taking for granted and, allowing yourself to sit in that comfort, that's creating, this epidemic of depression,
No, 100%.
So, yeah, man.
Yeah. And I would almost say that physical, like it not physical, but sought out discomfort is the easiest form of discomfort. And here's what I mean by this. Like putting yourself in situations where you have to face struggle is the easiest form of struggle. Yeah. So to elaborate, like I choose to play sports, and that's hard, but it's not that hard because I'm choosing to do it. Right. You know? So yeah, like getting on the treadmill and running 5 to 10 miles, you know, will test your mental toughness some, but it's not testing your mental toughness like it would be to lose your job or have a bad breakup. Like those are things you can't control. Right. And if you put yourself in uncomfortable positions that you can control, when uncomfortable positions come into your life that you can't control, you're already prepared a little bit better to deal with that stress. Absolutely. So in whatever area of your life it is, find a way to put yourself in stressful, uncomfortable positions that you can control. Yeah. Challenge yourself with new hobbies or business ventures or, I don't know, whatever. Challenge yourself to read a book, you know, every so often. Wake up and run. It can be a mental or physical challenge. But I'm telling you, even though you don't necessarily think it will apply, if you challenge yourself in little ways to build mental toughness when bad situations happen. Yeah. I mean, really bad situations like the loss of a job, the loss of a loved one. Yeah. The mental toughness you have developed from maybe things that you consider insignificant will make you a stronger person in times of real
need for mental toughness. Discomfort is the only place that growth happens. Yeah. And so I think that's a really good point that you can seek out that discomfort to actively, you know, force yourself to grow. That's what athletes are doing. That's what that's what college students are doing. That's what researchers are doing. They're trying to expand our knowledge base and our ability to self-reflect, and that really only happens through discomfort. And that doesn't always have to be the most adverse situations, but I think your point is a really good one that the more that you are able and the more that you are intrinsically capable of going after that forced growth, the more you'll be able to accept it when rough things happen, and the more you'll be able to take those situations and hopefully turn them into opportunities, because it's cliche, but there literally is always an opportunity out of the darkest place.
There is, and you really only learn through failure. Yeah. You really only learn, failure and success, but you really only learn what works and doesn't work by doing. Right. By doing. Yeah. And so, I'm seeking out failure and success actively. Right. I'm not waiting for a failure or a success to come out of the blue and mollywop me when I'm not expecting, especially in the failure part. Right. So I actively engage in things that test my my intellect, my physical aptitude or whatever. So I'm constantly learning about myself in ways that I can control. So when something that is out of my control comes into my life, I can be like, man, I have a really good idea of who I am through the failures and successes that I've put myself through with both hands on the steering wheel. Yeah. And now that this obstacle has come into my life, I'm prepared to face it head on, because I've faced a lot of obstacles through ventures of mine, and it's not like I'm unfamiliar with these challenges. Yeah. But
Do you have a deliberate self-reflection practice that you kind of fall back onto?
Yes, but regular? Not. So I definitely meditate a lot, but I don't have like scheduled times for meditation. Okay. So I definitely do things to what do you say,
self-reflect
100%. Yeah. So I journal a lot, I write a decent amount of poetry, and I meditate. Those are all things that I do to sort of self-reflect. Right. Honestly, just being there's no like one way to do it. Just being deliberate about having something that you do is important. Right. Yeah.
Awesome. So just a follow-up question. It's a pretty difficult question, so we'll see how you respond to it. But it goes in conjunction with muscular recovery and muscle building. And I was going to ask you, let me start with a different question first. Sure. So the first question that I was going to ask you when we were talking a little bit about your training earlier was, you mentioned that on top of doing actual fight training, you're doing cardio, you're doing some weightlifting, you're probably doing some other things. How do you kind of track your, the way that you feel internally and know what to train so that you're not like burning yourself out, so that you don't, do like a really heavy squat session and then you have to go, train when and your legs are just totally shot? How do you kind of like listen to your own body? How does that work for you?
So for me, I listen to people who have been there before. Like I listen to the professionals who are more familiar with those waters, because I don't want to try to explore uncharted waters without consulting someone else. That I feel like that's ignorant. So definitely I used to be of the bro science mentality of like, the harder you push, bro, the stronger you'll be. It's like, if you're in pain, just keep grinding.
Yeah.
But one of the greatest professional mixed martial artists of all time, Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson, said that one of the best things that he learned to do early in his career. I mean, this guy's an amazing UFC fighter. He has the most title defenses consecutive in UFC history. One of the most cerebral and technical combat sports athletes of this generation. He was like, I take days off when I feel sore.
Yeah.
I listen to my body. It's better to train smart than to train like an idiot. It's better to train smarter, not harder. And so, I guess for me, I first of all, I listen to my coaches. We have trainers, massage therapists, just other athletes who've been in the sport a long time. Listen to their guidance. But also just like your body will tell you when it needs a little bit of a rest, and just being in tune with my physical side of myself. Yeah. And the best way to be in tune with the physical side of yourself is to just train a lot. And it's hard to really articulate, but if you've been, training, 6 to 7 days a week for months, and when your body sort of feels on, you kind of have a good idea of when your body feels off, and sort of listening to it. I know it's a really generic answer, but it's generic because it's the truth.
It's true. Yeah, absolutely. No, a lot of people ask me that, like, what if I'm sore? Should I go do my back day? Should I, continue with the plan that I've been given by my trainer, or like that I found on the internet, or whatever it is? And I think the point really is that, especially when it comes to bodybuilding and muscle building and stuff like that, people so often neglect the very basic point that when you lift weights, when you exercise, you're not making gains. You are literally breaking down your muscles. Yeah. And so if you don't set out time for recovery, you will not recover. And it's really tough when, some of the biggest names in motivation and health and fitness right now are guys like David Goggins, where people have to remember David Goggins is not, when he first got into like running and like hard exercise, he wasn't doing it to build his body up. He was doing it to condition his mind. Yeah. Right. And so you have to remember that you have to take these things with a grain of salt, because you might not be as totally, self-sabotaging and, mentally abject as David Goggins was when he first got into this.
I don't think anyone is as mentally abject as David Goggins.
I don't think they are either. And so, yeah, there are times when you want to, like, you might be sore, and it's like, what, screw that, push through, break through that mental barrier. But you have to remember, if you want to recover, if you want to get stronger, the recovery is when that happens. Yeah,
and for combat sports athletes too, especially for head injury, like if you take a shot and you're feeling a headache, do not train. Right. Like if your arm breaks, if you break your arm, like it happens. You can recover. Even for worse injuries and broken bones, like tendons, like ACL tears, I would say, are worse than broken bones. Like your ACL will recover eventually if you train, especially for an athlete. Your body will heal a little bit quicker.
And there are ways to increase the productivity or increase the effectiveness of the recovery by training.
But brain damage, like CTE in your brain, that does not heal easy. And at a certain point it is permanent. So just a quick side note, if you are injured in the head for any sport, you definitely want to take the proper time to recover. You don't get any stronger. You just get a little stupider.
Exactly.
Yeah, or maybe a lot.
So let me ask you this question that somebody asked me on Twitter here, and it's basically, is it far more essential for martial artists to focus on avoiding oxidants compared to bodybuilders? They put in quotations, or they put in parentheses, higher injury risk, fast and slow twitch muscles, recovery rate and stuff. Difference between the ideal body weight of the two. So I guess what they're asking is, I'll put it in the diet sense. Like, do you actively try to avoid oxidizing foods or foods that are, frankly just unhealthy?
Well, I do not always watch my diet the best when I don't have a fight booked. Right. But fighters are not bodybuilders. We're not trying to build a certain physique. We're trying to build ourselves for optimal performance. Right. So, man, I hate the fact that this sounds like a cop-out answer, but like it is the most true answer I can think of. And like, honest to God, like I wish I had a more like answer specific to his question, but it really just depends on the fighter. Yeah. Like, everyone's obviously body works different for different diet, but also like even just like the mental aspect of it, like certain fighters like to eat like certain things before the day they fight, just because like it gets their mental psyche. And I know that sounds like such bro science, but like if it makes them feel comfortable, sometimes I feel like that would be better for their performance than them eating something they're uncomfortable with. Like that's such an unscientific answer to your question.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, honestly, it really just depends on every fighter, and I don't want to give an answer that I'm like uneducated on, because fighters know how to fight, and then they hire dietitians to teach them about their diet. Yeah.
Right, and that is a quick plug for hiring a coach for your health and fitness
Absolutely,
journey.
yeah.
Boom.
If it's something that you're committed to, pay someone who's taken the time to do a little bit of research and learn about what nutrition would give you the optimal performance for sure.
Sweet.
But a great question. But yeah, I definitely think the answer is it definitely depends on your body, but also like hire someone who knows what they're talking about.
Absolutely.
Which is not me, so I'm not going to give a scientific answer.
Cool. Okay, well, sweet Luke, I'm glad you came through, and I'm glad we did this little recording. And until next time, people can find you on Instagram. I'll throw your little tag in the description, wherever this is to be found, wherever people are listening to this. But until next time, I appreciate you coming through. And
yeah, thank you, man. I'd love to come on another time and then talk about like maybe like one. I feel like we touched a lot, like one aspect, and go super deep into it instead of like 3 or 4 and kind of skim the surface.
For sure.
But yeah, thank you so much for having me on, man. I really appreciate it. Really good conversation.
Absolutely.
And
until next time.
Handshake.
Sweet, and my pleasure. Well, there you have it, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Earth Movers. Don't forget to follow me wherever social media content is distributed at ZACH0Y. And until next time, stay frosty.